He stood in court, a black activist who had spent years fighting for justice in his community. Yet instead of being heard, he was silenced, dismissed by the very judge sworn to uphold fairness. The gavel came down, and with it, a man's credibility seemed to vanish. But behind the closed doors of City Hall, a secret was waiting. A secret powerful enough to unravel lies, expose corruption, and shake the very system that tried to bury him. What was hidden in those files, and why did the city fight so hard to keep it from the light? By day, Marcus Reed was known as a community organizer, a man who spent countless hours at neighborhood meetings, rallying for safer streets, fair housing, and equal treatment under the law. To his neighbors, he wasn't just an activist. He was the voice that refused to go silent when others were too tired to fight. His life was simple, almost predictable. Mornings filled with stacks of reports, evenings spent at church basements and town halls, always carrying that worn notebook filled with names, dates, and promises broken by the city. But beneath the routine, Marcus lived with a quiet awareness. Every protest sign he lifted, every speech he gave, seemed to paint a larger target on his back. He knew the system didn't like men who asked too many questions. Still, he kept going, because he believed the truth could not be ignored forever. What Marcus couldn't see, though, was that his path was already being twisted against him. The very courthouse where he thought his evidence would matter was preparing to strip his words of weight, and the walls of City Hall, those polished marble walls, were holding a secret strong enough to decide whether his fight would be remembered or erased. Marcus believed that his work would finally bring change. For months, he had gathered documents, eyewitness accounts, and even photographs pointing to misuse of public funds and deliberate neglect of black neighborhoods. Roads in his community went unrepaired for years, while wealthier districts received upgrades overnight. Schools crumbled while City Hall boasted about new stadiums. Marcus carried those truths like armor, convinced that the courtroom would be the one place he couldn't be ignored. But the moment he stepped inside, the weight shifted. The judge barely looked at him, tapping impatiently as if Marcus's evidence was nothing more than a nuisance. The city's lawyers smirked, whispering behind their polished briefcases. One by one, the files Marcus presented were waved aside, dismissed as inconclusive or irrelevant. It didn't matter that the proof was stacked high. It was clear the verdict had been decided long before he arrived. The tension rippled through the room. Supporters in the gallery leaned forward, stunned by how quickly the case was unraveling. For Marcus, each rejection felt like a blow. He wasn't just losing a legal battle. He was watching years of his life be erased in minutes. The judge's words cut sharp. The case was without merit. The gavel struck, and with that sound it seemed the fight was over. But Marcus knew better. Something about the city's eagerness to bury the evidence gnawed at him. He had seen hints, missing files, sudden resignations at City Hall, whispers of documents that never reached the courtroom. Someone, somewhere, was hiding more than just negligence. And if he was right, then the truth wasn't gone. It was waiting to be uncovered. As Marcus walked out of the courthouse, the cameras flashed, reporters shouted, and the city celebrated another failed activist. Yet beneath the humiliation, a quiet fire burned. He had lost in court, yes, but the real battle was only beginning, and somewhere, locked deep in the records of City Hall, the very proof they swore didn't exist was waiting to resurface. The question was, would Marcus find it in time, or would the system crush him before the truth ever saw the light? Weeks passed after the courtroom defeat, but Marcus refused to let the silence bury him. Then one night, a brown envelope slid under his door. Inside were documents stamped with the seal of City Hall, records that had never been shown in court. They told a story of deliberate neglect, of money funneled away from black neighborhoods and into projects that benefited the powerful. The very evidence the judge dismissed as non-existent was here, in Marcus's trembling hands. But the cost of truth came swiftly. Suddenly, his phone rang with anonymous threats. His car tires were slashed. Friends warned him to be careful, to let it go before it was too late. The city wasn't just trying to silence him in court, they were trying to erase him altogether. Still, Marcus knew there was no turning back. He stood before a packed community meeting, holding the files high, his voice shaking but unbroken. "They told us there was no proof," he declared, "but here it is." Gasps filled the room as page after page revealed the lies, the theft, the betrayal. What had been hidden in marble halls was now laid bare in the open. The city's power structure had underestimated him. What they thought would be the end of his fight had become the moment his voice carried further than ever before. But with that revelation came danger. If the documents were real, then those who had the most to lose would stop at nothing to silence him. The crowd rose to its feet, anger swelling, hope igniting. And in that electric moment, Marcus realized this battle was no longer his alone. The city had awakened. The question was, could the truth survive the storm that was about to follow? The files Marcus revealed spread like wildfire. Local news stations picked up the story, then national outlets. City officials who once stood tall behind podiums now scrambled to defend themselves. Investigations were launched, resignations followed, and the corruption that had been buried under years of polished speeches finally cracked open. For Marcus, it was vindication, but it came with scars. The threats never fully stopped, and trust in the system remained broken. Yet what mattered most wasn't what happened to him. It was what happened after him. Neighbors who once felt invisible now stood taller, realizing that silence had never been safety. Parents demanded better for their children. Activists pushed harder, and the city was forced to confront the very injustice it had tried to deny. Marcus had walked into a courtroom expecting justice and was dismissed. But in the end, the truth he uncovered carried more weight than any gavel. His fight was proof that power bends only when it is forced into the light. And that's the lasting mark of his story, that courage can outlive fear and one voice can ignite many. But the question lingers. Why must proof of injustice be dragged from the shadows before it is believed? How many more Marcus Reeds will it take before equality isn't something fought for in scraps, but honored as a right?